Yeah, I I'm not going to say I feel bad because I don't think that emotional response is the correct response in this situation. I think it's best to I have to appeal to people. I have to hope the best of people. I know that that's kind of weird in today's society. Hoping the best of people seems like the wrong thing to do, but it's part of who I am. It's built within me to expect the best of people. And yes, I get let down on a frequent basis, but the truth is, yes, I see a pattern of bad behavior. I always still want the best and expect the best of people. And the Safuu crowd, the Safuu diehards, the ones that, before the thing launched, I'm nuts. I don't know what I'm talking about. I'm absolutely whatever. You don't have a lot of views. You don't have a lot of holders. You don't have a lot of subscribers. And the same old rhetoric and the same old people. And the reason that I'm so fixated on this situation now is because I know that the vast majority of those people saying those things didn't bother listening to the totality of my coverage objectively, because if they had done so, they would realize that as you look at that graph here, you'd realize everything I said so far has come true, and it's following the exact pattern I told you it was going to go. Now, the thing is, Safu's still too young to appreciate what's really happening. There still needs to be more time that needs to pass. You're just reacting to the short term. You're not understanding that a lot of this takes time. But let's break this down, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, so you can understand and appreciate. When you look at today's graph, that you understand exactly what's happening, because it's exactly what I told you would happen if you objectively go back to my coverage of Safuu and listen to it as you watch the graph. You'll see there's a pattern, as Tim Bradley says, a pattern to exactly what I said, and it follows the graph perfectly. I said early on when it first launches, there's going to be some FOMO buys. People are going to be buying into this thing like crazy. If you look at the volume numbers, that's exactly what happened. It spiked, it jumped. I believe it started at like $15 or $17 or some crazy low number, and a bunch of people FOMO bought into the thing. That's good, right? Because it jumps the value, and that's fine. Then I said that cannot sustain, and at some point it's going to consolidate, right? We saw that happened. We see the consolidation roughly around the 4th of March-ish. It started to consolidate. People are dumping for profits, okay? Then I said the rebase should help persist value. It somewhat did, but somewhat didn't. It did the best it could, but there was a lot of people selling. Go forward, and then you get to the 8th. Now, the 8th is where the big bucks started dropping. Let me summarize what happened so you understand. Because if you also listen to the totality episode, I said the biggest risk of this one is about the pre-sale and the fact that they had the pre-sale. And you probably thought I was crazy. Here's the truth. That big dump that you see on the 8th, if you look at the graph and you zoom out like you're supposed to, that dump came from one person. That person had bought into the pre-sale. They bought 600 tokens. And you're like, well, yeah, but it's only 600 out of 300 something. But the problem is, by the time it grew to that peak, that person's 600 tokens was a very big chunk of the liquidity that's in there. There's only so much liquidity in the pool. So if you have a significant amount of the liquidity cashed out, it's going to dump on it. Now, the rebasing should help it recover, and we see somewhat of a trend back up. But we also see quite a few people that are selling now, because they see that, okay, this is probably the peak. We see that, and you also see, if you know how to hover over the graph, the volume is a fraction of what it was. This is all consolidation related, because what happens is when people see the sell start to come in, it triggers FOMO selling. People just get freaked, and they say, okay, it's time for me to sell out because this is the highest it's ever going to go. It probably isn't the highest it's going to go, but if you listen to the totality of the episode, I said it's going to have some FOMO growth. At some point, it's going to plateau. People are going to start selling, and then it's going to start dropping because the rebase isn't going to be able to fix it beyond a certain point. Now, where it's at as I record this, it's likely going to go back higher again, but you're still going to have some FOMO sells that are already there. People are going to be sketchy that, okay, it's probably hit the peak. It's probably as high as it's going to go. If I look at the graph, I don't think it's as high as it's going to go. I think it can go a lot higher, but I think people are going to start getting a little bit nervous and a little bit sketchy about leaving money in there. And unfortunately, that person that dumped 600 was stupid because they're losing value on the way down because the price is going down during the dump. It can only go so fast. If they were smart about it, they would have sold like 100 coins, right? And then 100 coins off 20 is what? 20 grand. Take the 20 grand, let it grow a little bit. Take the 20, take another 100. Now you're about 21 grand. Like they should have chunked it out. That wouldn't have harmed the project. It wouldn't have harmed themselves. It would have allowed the thing to continue growing. But this is the risk that I said is inherent to Safuu, is because of the constrained inventory, number one, and number two, because of that darn pre-sale. This is always the risk that you were going to engender. Now, if you were smart and you listened to the end of my episode, I said, if you're going to buy into this, don't hold long-term, take the profits. This is why. Because every token follows this pattern. You can go and look at every single token. They all follow the same pattern. There's always that initial pump, and then it starts dwindling. If you were in for a significant amount of money, you possibly might have lost quite a bit during this dump. Will you get it back? Possibly, but the risk is still there. If you're the gambler sort, by all means. My point is, if you were taking profits on the way up, you would have been insulated by that damage in the first place, which is why I said, take profit, don't YOLO, don't hold. I can count on two hands, a bunch of people that came back and said, oh, I made 700,000 deep. You didn't take 700,000. Your value appreciated possibly to 700,000, but because of what's happening, you probably lost a good portion of that 700,000. I'm sure it'll recoup as people get a little bit less sketchy, but the sketchiness is going to persist for a while. That's consolidation. It's normal, but you didn't really make that money until you cash it out. And what you should do is you should take profits. As I always have said, every single episode, you should be taking profits on the way up. Now, if you took profits on the way up, which I'm not seeing from the chart, but if you took profits on the way up and you were able to cash out a good amount, good on you. Because in the original episode, at no point did I tell you not to invest in it. I said I wasn't going to do it because of the risk. And the risk is strong. The risk is still strong. So, folks, it's very simple. You have one call to action. You need to listen to the totality of the episode that I present objectively and not come in already on attack mode. Because when you're in attack mode, you're ignoring fundamentals, you're ignoring the obvious. And when you ignore the obvious, you're going to miss these, quote, signals that I'm trying to impart to you to help you insulate against that risk. It's not about whether you do or don't invest. I don't make that decision for you. It's about what I see, and it's because every token follows the same pattern, but this one was worse because of the pre-sale. Consider, everybody that bought into the pre-sale bought in at a very low price point, and they likely know what I tell you. They know that it was going to jump and spike. They know that there's a lot of money to be made. That means you probably have a lot, and I already proved it on social media. I sent out, there are some whales here that hold roughly 15% of the inventory. If those people dump, you're not going to be holding that 700-something thousand, whatever, I promise you, unless you take those profits. That's all I ever said. Take the profits, because I'm telling you right now, there's a significant risk, especially now that we've gotten our first strong consolidation signal and we see sketchiness and the volume has now tanked from what it was. I'm telling you, this is still high risk. It has a potential for high reward, but it's still high risk. And I would strongly advocate to you to take your profits out and don't leave it in there long term. Then you can buy on dips as it goes back up. Now, as far as the maximum price, I talked about this with Zyto Finance, XIDO. I think this one has a really strong possibility of getting to roughly about 400 to 500 per coin. But that's based on a couple of ifs. Number one, it's based on how sketchy the people that bought in are. The fact that we saw this dude dump 600 of the coins this early tells me that this is probably a group that is not, we're not talking high, big dollar people. We're not talking big whale people. We're talking people that probably toss like $1,000 or $2,000 in it, expecting it to drop a zero, see that it drops 2 zeros, possibly 3, and then they said, okay, cool, I'm gonna cash it out and run because I think it's a high risk project. If I'm right, there's a lot more than just the one that dumped. And if I'm right, many of those would take their money and they're going to buy into other projects like Titano, like Libero, and like Terrarium. And if that's true, if what I'm saying is true, it would explain why then Terrarium still has the momentum it has, but then Safuu's momentum has dramatically slowed. Now, that said, Safoo's volume is still up there. But when I look at the volume numbers versus the liquidity, and you should be doing this too on DEX tools, you should be really concerned because it means that it's not sustainable, which is what I said if you listen to the whole episode. Your call to action is to listen to the whole episode and be objective. Don't go in with an opinion whether I'm right or wrong. Don't leave with an opinion whether I'm right or wrong. Your job should be listen to the messaging and then compare it to the graph, and you need to do it over time. It's not going to happen after 2 days. It's not going to happen after 3 days. It's not going to happen after a week. You got to watch it over time. Every crypto is an over time. When we do the measurements, it takes time to get to that point because remember, it takes time to get the holders to build up. Safuu is just now at just over 10,000 holders. It's going to take a while before we really see what's going to happen. And then if they bother getting on an exchange, I guarantee you're not going to see the dramatic amounts of spike growth. You're going to see a lot of, I don't want to say pump and dump, that's not fair, but you're going to see a lot of people that are exploiting it. That's if it gets on the exchange in the first place. It should, based on, but holder count being in this low, it should, but just probably in a long play. Or you see people that get sketchy. They see that the price is dipping, even though it's not a lot of dip, but they see the price is dipping and they get sketchy and they don't buy in when they normally would have. That could play. I suspect it continues to go up. I think this sketchiness will last probably the good portion of the day, but then it'll dwindle off in the afternoon is my guess. And that's just looking at the buys and the sells. I don't see as many large buys as I did before. And the large sells are coming largely from the contract. So that's good. So that means we should stabilize, but the volume is way down. No volume, no growth. So FYI, if you're one of those naysayers and Safuu diehards and out there, I encourage you, listen to the totality of my coverage, not going in with a presetting your mind whether I'm right or wrong and not leaving it to determine whether I'm right or wrong, taking the information, matching it against what you see in the graph and the behavior and all the data. And at some point, over time, at some point, you will see that what I said is true. And then at that point, whatever decision you made is on you. Whether that was to buy in and you bought in and then you cashed out profits like I told you you probably should, cool. I celebrate you making some money and getting the dash and getting out. If it was you're just going to hold because that's what you believe, that's up to you. But I'll tell you, we just had a dump of 60 some odd BNB. It started, ladies and gentlemen. It started. The consolidation, the necessary consolidation, it's healthy. It's actually good. It's healthy to see consolidation. So people are freaking, but they really shouldn't freak because it needed this. It needed to get to a little bit of sanity instead of unreasonable growth. You never want to see unreasonable growth in any token. Now, it's not that far down. It's about $100 a coin down from its peak. Looks like it launched at $18. So it's still a wide range of movement from resistance. We don't know exactly where the resistance point's going to be. And we don't, basically, as people dump, right, we don't know how far down it could go. And we don't know who's going to dump and who's going to hold and who's going to sell for profits. If you're listening to this and you bought into Safuu, all I'm saying to you is take profit. Don't hold. And if you YOLO'd into the darn thing, I definitely tell you to take profits because it's that high risk of a project. You are free to completely ignore what I'm suggesting to you. It's up to you. And you might win it big. But again, I encourage you to look at the liquidity pool because a lot of people that bought into the pre-sale probably have a good chunk of what's in the liquidity. And if there's no liquidity, you're not going to be able to cash out. That's why I'm encouraging you to take profits. It's up to you though. I'm just telling you, when I see a 60 some odd BNB just come flying through, which is 100 some odd coins, I already know without looking that that person was pre-sale. And I already know that anybody that dumps big was pre-sale, even though they didn't have a lot of coins. The growth, as I said in the video, the growth was so unsustainable. The price goes so high, that pre-sale was going to be damaging to the project regardless. And you don't know how many people YOLO'd into that pre-sale. You can go and analyze blockchain. I'm not going to do that because it's a waste of my time because I already knew this is the pattern. But you are free to, and I encourage you to think through what I've been saying and really stop creating your own resolution to what I said. In plain English language, all I said was, don't YOLO, don't hold long term, take profits. If anybody has any response as to why that's a bad strategy for something like this, that's this high risk, I want to smoke. Bring it.